They changed the locks on my grandfather's house while I was still at his funeral. I stood outside in the rain, suitcase in hand, still wearing the black dress I'd worn to bury the only man who ever loved me like family. I rang the doorbell 3 times before my Uncle Roy opened the door, barely cracking it open. "What are you doing here, Hazel?" he asked, his voice dry and cold. "I'm here to stay, just like Grandpa wanted. He left the house to me. I have the letter," he snorted. "That letter doesn't mean anything, kid. The will says otherwise. I'm the executor, and you're just a niece, not family enough to matter." The door slammed shut. I stood there, stunned, my fingers still curled around the brass handle. The same door I used to burst through every summer growing up, straight into Grandpa's arms. Now I wasn't even allowed inside. "My name is Hazel Monroe. I'm 24 and just finished my design degree in Chicago. My parents died in a car accident when I was 12. My mom's side wanted nothing to do with me, and my dad's family only took me in because Grandpa insisted. He raised me the best he could with his quiet strength and warm heart. He was all I had. He used to sit beside me with his old architectural sketches, saying, 'One day, you'll make beautiful things, Hazel.' I can't wait to see it." He passed away just 3 weeks ago from a sudden heart attack. And with him, my only anchor was gone. We'd always talked about what would happen when he passed. He told me he wanted me to live in the house, to keep the garden going, to make it a home full of art and life. He even gave me a letter he'd written, his wishes, in his own words. I held on to it like it was gold. But none of it mattered when Roy got involved. Roy is my mom's older brother. He'd barely visited Grandpa in years, but the second he passed, Roy swooped in like a vulture. At the reading of the will, I found out Roy had somehow been made executor. The lawyer said Grandpa's official will left the house and most of the estate to him. I couldn't believe it. I showed them the letter. They shrugged it off like it was a grocery list. After getting kicked out that day, I spent the night in a cheap motel, the kind with flickering hallway lights and paper-thin walls. I remember staring at the ceiling, gripping that letter, trying not to cry. The betrayal wasn't just from Roy. It was from every cousin, every relative who used to smile at me during Christmas, but now wouldn't even return my calls. They called me dramatic. Said I should let the grown-ups handle it. Told me I was lucky Grandpa fed me all those years. I spent the next 2 weeks scraping by. I picked up a shift job at a local woodworking studio just to afford a roof over my head. I ate ramen noodles, counted coins for laundry, and went to sleep every night with rage boiling in my chest. Then one night, I remembered something. Before Grandpa died, he gave me a small wooden box with his initials carved into the lid. He told me, "Don't open it unless you really need a miracle." I hadn't touched it since. But that night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my rented room, turned the latch, and opened the box. Inside were 5 pieces of paper, stock certificates, old and faded. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. But when I searched the company name online, my heart stopped. They were early shares in a tech startup Grandpa had once consulted for, a company that had quietly exploded over the last decade. I grabbed my laptop and started crunching the numbers. The total value? Over $2.4 million. I sat there, frozen, as the reality hit me. While Roy had stolen the house, Grandpa had still made sure I had something big, but I wasn't going to use it just to live comfortably. I was going to use it to take everything back. And Roy? He was about to find out just how dangerous a niece with nothing to lose could be. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not because I was sick, but because I couldn't think about sanding another piece of wood while my head was spinning with numbers and questions. I stared at those stock certificates like they might disappear. I must have checked the value 10 times, each time praying it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. I had $2.4 million in my hands. Or at least the legal right to claim that amount, if I played this right. But I knew better than to let excitement cloud my judgment. I wasn't going to throw this away on some flashy revenge scheme. I needed to be smart, careful, silent. First, I found a financial advisor. Not just anyone, I looked for someone with experience handling sudden wealth, and more importantly, someone discreet. After 3 days of research and 2 virtual consultations, I found her. Her name was Vivian Cross, and from the moment she spoke, I knew I could trust her. Vivian helped me set up everything. We created a holding company to claim the shares. She introduced me to a legal team that specialized in asset protection. No one would know my name. The money was mine, but on paper, it looked like it belonged to a small firm out of Denver. I asked her if I should tell anyone, my friends, Aunt Lila, even my ex-roommate who'd always believed in me. Vivian said it best. You're going to want to scream it from the rooftops, but the power isn't in telling them. The power is in what you do next. So I didn't tell a soul. Instead, I went back to work, acted like nothing had changed, and quietly started planning. Meanwhile, Uncle Roy was everywhere. Every local newspaper ran a story about his visionary transformation of the Monroe estate into a boutique countryside resort. He gave interviews, wore tailored suits, smiled with bleached teeth in front of the very garden I used to help Grandpa weed on Sundays. He even renamed the place Roy's Retreat. And if that wasn't enough salt in the wound, he posted a photo on Facebook of the newly renovated living room, complete with the fireplace mantel I hand-carved with Grandpa when I was 15. He didn't just steal the house, he stole the memories. I wasn't looking for revenge at first. I just wanted what was mine. But every smug headline, every staged family photo he posted, pushed me closer to the edge. Until one night, I found out he'd mortgaged the property to fund the renovations. That was the shift. Roy didn't own the house outright. He'd borrowed against it through a small local bank. That meant if he missed payments, or if someone bought the debt, he'd lose it all. So that's exactly what I did. Through the shell company Vivian helped me set up, I made an offer to purchase the mortgage Roy owed. The bank, seeing he was already behind on 2 payments, accepted. Just like that, I became the owner of Roy's debt. I now had the legal right to seize the property if he defaulted. I didn't do anything immediately. No, I let it simmer. I let him believe everything was perfect while the walls slowly started to close in. He had no idea the pressure he was under came from the very person he'd humiliated at Grandpa's funeral. But karma doesn't always wait for the perfect cue. 1 week later, I was at the grocery store when I saw someone familiar in the checkout line. Aunt Janet, Roy's sister. She hadn't spoken to me since the will reading, hadn't even looked my way that day. But now, she waved me over like we were lifelong friends. "Hazel!" she chirped. "Oh, I've been meaning to call you." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yes, well, Roy mentioned you might be coming to the housewarming party next Saturday. It's going to be huge. We're expecting local officials. Even the mayor might show up." I stared at her for a long second. Then I smiled. "I'll be there." And I meant it. What I didn't tell her was that by next Saturday, Roy's precious boutique retreat would legally belong to me. And he'd have no idea until the moment the papers dropped on his front steps. Until then, I'd let him throw his grand party. Let him soak in every second of his fake success. Because the moment he raised that champagne glass, thinking he'd finally won, I was going to pull the floor out from under him. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but anticipation. I'd been waiting for this moment since the day I stood in the rain, locked out of the house my grandfather built with his bare hands. Since Roy slammed the door in my face and told me I wasn't family. Since he smiled in interviews, called himself a self-made man, and erased every trace of my existence from the story of Grandpa's legacy. But I never forgot. And now, neither would he. At exactly 9 a.m. the next morning, my attorney Marcus filed the foreclosure notice. It was delivered to Roy's mailbox by certified courier, just as the first guests were arriving. The clock had started ticking. He had 24 hours to pay the full balance of the mortgage, plus interest and legal fees, or vacate the property. A total of $630,000. And the best part? He didn't know it yet. I arrived at the party an hour later, dressed in a simple black jumpsuit and flats. I didn't need to be flashy, just present. Roy didn't notice me at first. He was too busy shaking hands with city council members, giving grand tours, showing off the new pool and wine cellar. People praised the stone patio. Funny, considering I helped Grandpa pour that concrete when I was 17. Eventually, he spotted me from across the lawn, his smile faltering. I waved. "Hazel?" he said, approaching cautiously. "Didn't expect you here." "You invited me, didn't you?" I replied sweetly. "Aunt Janet said I'd be welcome." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, sure, just be respectful. This is an important day." "I wouldn't dream of causing a scene," I said. "Enjoy it while you can." His brow creased, but he shrugged it off and walked away. I wandered through the party, nodding at faces that once turned away from me. I didn't need their approval now. Around 2 p.m., I noticed the courier return. He handed Roy a thick envelope, then left without a word. I watched from the shade of a magnolia tree as Roy opened the notice. His face turned pale, then red, then confused. He reread the papers, flipping through them again and again, like the words might change. His wife approached, whispering something. He shook his head, then stormed back into the house, slamming the front door behind him. I gave it 30 minutes, then I followed. Inside, the mood had shifted. Guests were murmuring, trying to figure out why their host had disappeared. I slipped past the crowd and found Roy in the study, pacing in tight circles, the foreclosure notice crumpled in his hand. "What did you do?" he snapped when he saw me. "I gave you a warning," I said calmly. "Enjoy it while you can." "This is impossible," he growled. "The bank would have called me." "They didn't have to," I interrupted. "Because I'm not a bank. I'm the new holder of your debt. I bought your mortgage 3 weeks ago." His jaw dropped. "You?" he whispered. "Me," I confirmed. "The same niece you threw out like trash. The same girl who helped Grandpa build this place. The one you thought would just disappear." "You can't do this." "Oh, but I already have." He stared at me, his face contorted with disbelief and panic. "I'll find the money. I'll call in favors." "You have until tomorrow at 9 a.m., I said, glancing at my watch. "And you're already in default." He opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by a loud knock at the front door. A man in a black blazer stepped inside, followed by 2 officers. He held up a document. "Mr. Roy Caldwell," he announced. "I'm here on behalf of the County Property Enforcement Office. Due to the mortgage transfer and pending foreclosure, we're placing a temporary hold on all business operations at this residence. No guests may remain. This property is now under legal review." Gasps echoed through the house. Guests started whispering, grabbing their coats. The mayor's assistant pulled him away from the crowd. Roy's wife rushed in, demanding answers. Roy just stood there, frozen, watching his empire collapse in real time. But the real twist? I wasn't done yet. I turned to him, calm as ever. "You should also know that the contractor you stiffed last month, I paid him to come forward. He's filing a fraud claim. And that fake, will you present it at the reading? We found the original. It was hidden in Grandpa's sketchbook. Guess who's being audited?" His face went white. "Comment the number 1 if you want to see how Roy will pay for this." He didn't come out of the study for hours. After the property enforcement officer shut down the party, Roy disappeared behind that heavy oak door, like a wounded animal. The guests scattered quickly, whispering and shaking their heads as they left. The press had already gotten wind of the foreclosure, and by sunset, photos of the locked front gate were circulating online with headlines like, "Local businessman faces sudden legal crisis." I stayed. Not because I needed to rub it in, but because I wanted him to look me in the eye when the final piece fell into place. He emerged just before 8 p.m., looking 10 years older than he had that morning. His hair disheveled, tie loosened, jaw clenched. He didn't speak to me at first, just walked into the kitchen, poured himself a drink, and sat at the island like a man waiting for a sentence to be read. Finally, he said, "Why are you doing this?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You really don't know?" I get it. You're angry, but this is overkill. Overkill? I stepped closer. You locked me out of my grandfather's house the day we buried him. You told me I was just a niece, not family. You rewrote his will, took everything, erased me from his story, and made money off a house filled with my memories. He said nothing. I continued, voice sharp but calm. This isn't revenge, Roy. This is correction. He stood abruptly, slamming his glass on the counter. You're throwing away your family name for what? Some twisted sense of justice? You threw away that name the second you used it to lie. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and slid it across the counter. What's this? He asked warily. Your final bill. Inside was the legal notice confirming that the property, including the land, the house, and all associated business assets, now legally belonged to my holding company. There would be no extensions, no grace period. The fraud investigation had frozen his accounts, and by Monday, the sheriff's office would begin the eviction process. He didn't open the envelope. He just stared at it like it might bite him. This was Grandpa's house, he whispered. Exactly. And then, right as I turned to leave, he muttered something that made me stop cold. Do you even know why he changed the will? I slowly turned back to face him. What are you talking about? Roy's eyes flickered, like he wasn't sure whether to say it. But he was cornered, and he knew it. He didn't change it. I didn't forge it, Hazel. He did it himself, after you left. I froze. What do you mean after I left? He took a deep breath. A year before he passed, you stopped visiting. He told me you never returned his calls, said you were always busy. He thought you'd moved on. That wasn't true. I'd called every week, emailed, sent cards, and never got a reply. Liar, I hissed. He shook his head. He was hurt. He said maybe it was better if I handled things when the time came. And yes, I made sure the paperwork favored me. But the will, he changed it himself. He never saw your messages, Hazel. My heart dropped. Then it hit me. The only person who had access to Grandpa's phone and email besides him was his caregiver, a woman Roy had hired through his own company. You kept my messages from him, I said slowly. You cut me off before he died. He didn't deny it. And that was when the real twist landed. Because I didn't just own the house now. I owned the entire holding company Roy had secretly used to funnel Grandpa's estate. Through months of legal tracing, my team discovered his shell corporations one by one. And last week, I acquired the final one, the business Roy had used to hire the caregiver. I own everything now, Roy, I whispered, including your secrets, and believe me, I'm not done yet. His face drained of color. The final nail in Roy's coffin came 2 weeks later, in court. He tried to delay the proceedings, of course, claimed illness, confusion, even temporary amnesia. But none of that mattered. The fraud investigation had uncovered everything. Fake accounting, backdated documents, forged signatures. He'd spent years building an empire out of deception, and now the whole thing was collapsing, brick by brick. The judge didn't even hesitate. Roy was stripped of all legal control over my grandfather's estate. The will he manipulated was declared invalid. And most importantly, the court acknowledged the original letter, the one Grandpa gave me, as a clear expression of his true intent. That letter saved everything. Roy lost the house, the land, the business, the respect of every person in town who used to shake his hand like he was some kind of visionary. But that wasn't the worst part. The real punishment came when his lies became public. The local paper ran a front-page story titled, Family Betrayal, The Truth Behind the Caldwell Estate Scandal. It detailed everything. How he cut me off from my grandfather in his final year. How he doctored the will, and how he threw me out the same day we buried the only family who ever loved me. By the time the article made its rounds, Roy couldn't walk down the street without someone whispering behind his back. His business partners dropped him. His wife left him. Even his own daughter, my cousin, who once laughed at my cheap little life, posted an open letter on Facebook, apologizing for ever defending him. He had nothing left. And he knew it. The last time I saw him, he was standing on the sidewalk outside a rundown motel on the edge of town, staring at a crumpled eviction notice in his hand. He didn't see me. I just watched from across the street, calm and still, like I'd finally come up for air after years underwater. After the court officially transferred ownership of the property, I walked back into my grandfather's house for the first time since the funeral. It smelled like dust and varnish. The furniture Roy bought was gone. The cheap luxury finishes he added had already begun to peel. But beneath it all, the bones were still here. The house I grew up in, the home Grandpa built, and now it was mine. I didn't renovate it into a resort. I restored it, polished every original beam, brought back the old garden, the one Grandpa used to tend every morning with a thermos of black coffee. I even reopened the shed in the back and found the workbench where we'd carved that mantelpiece together. I kept it all, and then I opened something new. Using part of my trust fund, I converted the upstairs wing into a community art space. Free classes, supplies, mentorships for local kids who had nowhere to go after school. I named it the Monroe Studio, after the man who taught me to love design and who believed in me when no one else did. That was my revenge. Not just taking everything back, but turning it into something no one could ever touch again. Now, people still talk about what happened, about the niece who brought down the great Roy Caldwell. Some say I was ruthless. Others call it poetic justice. Me? I call it balance. Because in the end, I didn't ruin him. He did that all by himself. Comment the number 1 if you think Roy got exactly what he deserved. And if you want more true stories like this, make sure to subscribe.